Hey guys, welcome to No Culty Vibes. I'm your host, Cassie Marie, ex-cult hopper turned artist and content creator. And in today's video episode, we are going to be talking about Danny Masterson's sentencing and specifically some of his celebrity friends and family members and what they had to say about him during the trial and during sentencing. We're going to be talking about Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, and Danny Masterson's sister, Alanna. Really quickly before we dive in, if you are watching this on YouTube and maybe you don't want to keep this open, you don't want to watch, you just want to listen, head on over to my podcast, No Culty Vibes, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on the podcast and you want to see my face and some slides, you can head over to YouTube. Again, same thing, No Culty Vibes. You can also find me on TikTok and on Instagram at the.CassieMarie. And if you like all things cults, culty news, trending topics, and pop culture, hit the like button and subscribe to see more content. I'm going to go ahead and put a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode and video. I am going to be discussing really difficult topics, sexual assault, violence. Please take care. You know what's best for you. Pause, listen to it in chunks, come back later, skip it, listen to something else. I totally understand. Just wanted to give you a heads up. So today was a big day with Danny Masterson's sentencing. This has been a long time coming for the Jane Does and them getting a little bit of justice for the horror they experienced from Danny, not only back when it happened, but literally every moment since then. We got to hear the victims' impact statements today, and we were all sitting on the edge of our seats wondering how long he would get because there were some questions because he was charged with 2 counts of forcible rape. We were wondering if he was going to serve the minimum or maximum, if he was going to serve those concurrently or consecutively. We had all those questions answered today, and Danny Masterson was sentenced to life in prison and will be eligible for parole in 25 and a half years. I believe they said. I'm not a legal girly. I don't know all the details about why it's 25 and a half years, but Judge Olmedo, who was the presiding judge over this case, did rule that he would serve them his sentences for each count consecutively and not concurrently. The victims' impact statements were extremely powerful to read through. They were really sad. You can find them on Tony Ortega's Substack. He had notes from someone in the courtroom that he was able to post to give you an idea of what the Jane Doe said during their impact statements. I'm also going to do a separate video on those, highlighting some things in particular that I think really spoke to the cultiness and the coercive control and undue influence of Scientology, as well as the similarities between toxic relationships and cults. I think that's really important to discuss. But along with the impact statements, we also got to hear from one of Danny's attorneys, kind of speaking in favor of him and talking about all the things that friends and family members sent in to Judge Olmedo ahead of his sentencing. The attorney, as far as we know, said that Danny received over 50 letters of support ahead of sentencing, talking about what a great guy he is and how much he's done for people over the years. His attorney even mentioned like him donating money to firefighters from 9/11. Like I don't know why that was relevant to include, but apparently one of the firefighters wrote a letter just basically saying, yeah, he donated to us. We really appreciate it. I had a sneaking suspicion that Ashton Kutcher was one of those really close friends that wrote a letter in support of Danny. I didn't know this for sure, but I was waiting because Tony Ortega said that he was going to try to get a hold of the letters that family and friends sent in. Apparently, that is public record. And I thought, surely Ashton Kutcher wouldn't write a letter of support for a convicted rapist that would be so easily accessible by the public. But Lisa Bartley from ABC 7 News in LA tweeted this earlier today saying that she picked up the letters, her copies of the letters from Masterson's family and friends that were sent to Judge Olmedo ahead of today's sentencing. She said she's still going through them, but actors Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis both speak highly of their friend, now convicted rapist Danny Masterson. I find this really interesting that they would submit these knowing that they could be public information. I'm not sure what line of thinking they were going down with this. It's really shocking. I find it interesting that we have proof now because every time I've criticized Ashton Kutcher for not speaking out against his best friend, who he was best friends with, while Danny Masterson was committing these crimes, um, people generally get very mad at me because Ashton Kutcher is an advocate for or advocate against child trafficking, and he had a foundation, I don't know if he still does, that helped women and victims of this type of abuse, but when it was so close to home, he didn't seem to have anything to say about it. However, he did have something to say earlier this year, back in January, I believe, of 2023. He was interviewed for a magazine and did comment on the whole Danny Masterson situation for the first time. This was ahead of Danny's retrial and before he was found guilty. This blurb says, speaking to Esquire, Kutcher said what he wants is for Masterson, quote, to be found innocent of the charges brought against him, end quote. However, that doesn't mean Kutcher wants Masterson off the hook for alleged crimes. Kutcher just hopes Masterson's alleged behavior isn't true because Masterson was such a mentor for him throughout his career. If the allegations against Masterson are true, that's a different story. Interesting, Ashton. It's a different story if it's true, but not if he's convicted because you'll still send a letter of support in for him. Very interesting. Ashton went on to say, quote, ultimately, I can't know, end quote, Kutcher said about the outcome of Masterson's trial. I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, I'm not the DA, I'm not the victim, and I'm not the accused. He's not an awful lot of things. And so, in that case, I don't have the space to comment. I just don't know. And look, that's fine. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he can't be the one to know exactly what his friend did. I understand all of the people that say, do you know everything your best friend does? Or like he couldn't possibly know, like Danny could have easily been lying to him, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that. But Ashton and Danny were really, really close around the time that this occurred. And I just find it hard to believe with the fact that they were running in the same circles. I mean, Ashton was not a Scientologist. He's never been a Scientologist, but he had a lot of Scientology friends and he ran in these same circles that Danny ran in. And I have a feeling he knew how this stuff worked. Do I know that for sure? No, I don't. But all I can say is I may not know every single thing my friends or best friends are doing, but if they're accused of something like this and the victims came forward in the way that these Jane Does did against all odds, against Scientology, and my best friend literally harassing them, and it was proven guilty and my friend was proven guilty in a court of law, I would have something to say about it. I would say, this is awful. I was blindsided. I was duped. I didn't know. I would not be standing behind my friend and defending him. That blurb also goes on to say, reflecting on the current allegations against Masterson, Kutcher said he often thinks of his former co star's child. Someday his kid is going to read about this, Kutcher said, referring to the onslaught of internet articles about Masterson's alleged abuse and trial. Kutcher added that he supports anyone who has faced abuse, saying, I wholesale feel for anybody who feels that they were violated in any way. I feel like that was such a weird way for him to word that. But again, you wholesale feel for anyone who feels they've been violated or believes they've been violated, but not enough for them to have justice. Like you don't believe the Jane Does. because your best friend is the one being accused. It just seems gross. I remembered reading this when Ashton Kutcher was first featured in the magazine earlier in January. I made a video about it then because I just thought it was like very much a cop out for him to say, even though I was pretty critical of it even before Danny Masterson was found guilty. I'm even more critical of it looking back now. But as I was reading Jane Doe 1's victim impact statement, I came across this part. I didn't put a screenshot of it in the slide, so I'm just going to read it to you. It's a little confusing and a little jumbled. So if I am misinformed, if this is not what Jane Doe 1 said, I will absolutely come out, correct the record, change my mind. But it reads, I have 3 daughters. I wonder if Danny Masterson's co-star had my, I think she means knew my 9-year-old daughter's name was on an NDA and that it forbid her from disclosing any information about rape. It required her not to disclose. The reason she knew about the rape was that Danny Masterson arranged for a classmate of my daughter's to tell her, shame her, tell her her mommy is a liar, and Danny didn't rape her. That is literally so sad to read and upsetting. But it reminded me uh, of this interview that Ashton Kutcher did. And I wonder if she's referring to when he said Kutcher often thinks of his former co star's child. Someday his kid is going to read about this, Kutcher said, referring to the onslaught of internet articles about Masterson's alleged abuse and trial. And it really sounds to me like Jane Doe 1 was calling out that statement in particular, kind of saying, like, your friends and your co-star is worried about what your daughter is going to read on the internet. I wonder if your co-star knows that my daughter's name was on an NDA saying that she couldn't disclose anything about rape, a rape that she would have known nothing about had Danny Masterson not arranged for her to know about it. I don't know for sure if that's what Jane Doe 1 meant or not. Like I said, hopefully we'll get better copies of their statements if they choose to release them. If not, like, this is entirely my opinion. This is entirely just speculation based on the patterns that I'm noticing. But that's what that sounded like to me. And I found it interesting. And she did say co-star. So she was, no matter what, she was referring to a co-star of Danny's, and she was calling someone out in regards to what he did and what they're supporting. So I don't know. That's just my opinion. Would love to know what you think. I would love to know how you feel about Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis sending in letters of support for Danny. Does that change your views of them, your thoughts on them? Does it surprise you that they would do something that could be accessed by the public? Let me know what you think either in the comments or I think you can leave comments on the podcast as well. Wherever you can comment, find me on Instagram. Let me know if you think this is as crazy as I think it is. I also wanted to talk in this video a little bit about Alanna Masterson. The Masterson clan was in the courtroom in full force for the sentencing. You had Bijou there, Danny's wife, Danny's mom was there, and all of Danny's siblings were there, as they were for most of the trial and the retrial. His brother Chris, his brother Jordan, his sister Alanna, and he had several friends and Scientologists in his section as well, all there to stand by him during the trial. And in Jane Doe 1's victim impact statement, she talked about the intimidation that she faced while she was testifying. This part of her statement reads, during trial, Danny had friends pack hallways and etc. to intimidate me. A South African man who assaulted me as a teen, he came to court despite my protest. He did what he could. the defendant's sister in the bathroom. When I had my panic attack on the stand, I ran to the bathroom with my DA advocate. I screamed into the corner of the bathroom, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't do this. I started splashing water on my face. I see the door opens and I recognize a girl smiling at me. My DA advocate looked at her and said, "We have to leave," because I didn't have space or grace. She didn't have the space or grace to give me that space. So, if I read that correctly and if it was reported correctly, the defendant's sister would be Alanna Masterson. And that means that when Jane Doe 1 was on the stand and Alanna Masterson was in the courtroom watching her, aware that she was on the stand, and Jane Doe 1 was having a panic attack and had to take a break and leave the courtroom, Alanna Masterson decided that that was the exact time that she also needed to go to the bathroom. The sister of the defendant, who had been there supporting him in court every single step of the way, couldn't go to a different bathroom, couldn't see that that's the bathroom she ran into, couldn't hear her screaming, freaking out, saying that she can't breathe, and decided to go into that bathroom specifically and smile at her. What? That is literally so gross and disgusting. And I'm honestly like, I am shocked. I know I shouldn't be shocked by Scientology tactics at all, but I am shocked that someone would do that, to have such a lack of empathy for a person, that you would invade their space while they are literally having a panic attack, when you are not invited and you are not holding space for that person, and you would come in and make them uncomfortable. That seems so outrageous to me. Chris, Jordan, and Alanna all also wrote letters in favor of Danny Masterson. They wrote how, in many ways, he became a father to them after their father divorced and their mother, Carol, worked. Alanna said he'd sit front row at ballet recitals and he let her live with him in college. Jordan and Chris had similar accounts of ways he helped them growing up. I just find this like, I I can understand loving your brother. I can understand loving your sibling. I can understand wanting to be there while they face the consequences of their actions. I can understand having a hard time grieving and reconciling that someone who was so good to you at times in your life was so horrible to another person at times in their lives. I can understand that. I would probably draw the line at writing a letter of support for my sibling that did the horrific things that Danny did to these Jane Does. This is not like a petty crime. This was a violent, violent assault. And I am constantly shocked by the people that still are standing up and supporting Danny, whether they're fans of like his characters, whether they're friends and family members. These higher profile people, these celebrities, I cannot understand why you would publicly stand up in defense of someone who is convicted of these crimes. That is all for this episode, for this video. I will have more coming out on the topic of Danny Masterson's sentencing, more comments on the victim impact statements, as well as the reactions from people who were in the courtroom. So stay tuned for that. I have some more videos coming out about 8 passengers and the Ruby Frankie case. So stay tuned for that as well. If you've made it all the way to the end, please like this video if you found it interesting. Subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about all the things in the comments. I truly appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time on No Culty Vibes. Bye.